Chapter 1. All Aboard. Alicia Torres squinted against the morning sun as the bus pulled up to the curb, its brakes hissing like a sigh of resignation. She tightened her grip on the strap of her worn tote bag, shifting it higher on her shoulder. Inside was everything she needed for the day: her lunch, a tablet with cracked edges, and a small pouch of her 4-year-old son Noah's favorite crackers. She glanced at her watch. 8:12 a.m. She wasn't late, but she was cutting it close. The driver didn't look at her as she stepped aboard. He sat behind the wheel, a faded baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, sunglasses masking the rest of his expression. His uniform shirt was wrinkled, and a faint odor of coffee and something sour hung in the air. "Morning," she said out of habit. The driver didn't respond. His hands, thick and pale, gripped the wheel like it might escape. Alicia frowned but moved toward the back. The usual mix of passengers filled the seats: a suited man with his phone glued to his ear, a teenager with earbuds in, bobbing her head to an invisible rhythm, and an elderly man gazing out the window as though the world outside might vanish at any moment. Alicia settled into an empty seat near the middle and let out a small sigh of relief. She wasn't the only one noticing the strangeness of the morning. As the bus rolled on, the tension in the air grew more palpable. A woman near the front grumbled when the driver missed her stop. "Hey, that was mine!" No response. The passengers exchanged uneasy glances. The suited man pulled his phone away from his ear. "Driver, I think you missed the stop." The driver's shoulders didn't move. "Excuse me, sir." Still nothing. "Maybe he didn't hear," Alicia said quietly. She leaned forward in her seat. "Driver, are you okay?" The intercom crackled to life. "Good morning, everyone." The voice was calm, almost cheerful, with a strange cadence that immediately set Alicia's nerves on edge. The driver didn't turn around. His reflection in the rearview mirror was obscured by his hat and sunglasses. "Today's ride will be different. I'll be your host for a special journey, and I have just one rule: no one leaves until the games are done." A ripple of confused laughter ran through the bus. The teenager pulled out one earbud, her brow furrowed. "Games," a man scoffed. "What are you talking about? Just pull over." The bus didn't slow. If anything, it picked up speed. Alicia's stomach churned as the cityscape blurred past. The driver's voice came again, smooth as silk, but with a sharp undercurrent that sent shivers down her spine. "The first game is simple. Simon says, stay seated." "Is this a joke?" Craig Benton barked from the front row, his voice thick with irritation. He was the kind of man who wore his confidence like armor, but even he sounded shaken. "It's not funny. Pull over," Craig demanded, standing up. The bus swerved suddenly, throwing him off balance. He grabbed the nearest pole and glared at the driver. "Simon didn't say," the driver remarked, his voice sing-song now. The suited man sank back into his seat as mutters and whispers spread through the passengers. "What the hell is going on?" someone said. Alicia clutched her tote bag as the bus left the main roads, veering onto a narrow, winding route she didn't recognize. The city's hum faded into eerie silence, punctuated only by the drone of the engine. By the time the bus reached the cliffside, panic had settled over the passengers like a thick fog. The road ahead was nothing but a winding ribbon of asphalt perched precariously above a sheer drop into rocky waters. The driver pressed a button, and the doors hissed closed with finality. "Let's make it interesting," he said, his voice tinged with amusement. "Simon says, hold on tight." The bus lurched forward at a speed that sent people screaming. Alicia's heart pounded as she grabbed the edge of her seat, her mind racing. This couldn't be real. "First game's over," the driver said after a beat, slowing the bus just as suddenly. "Good job, everyone, but don't get comfortable. The next one's about to begin." The intercom cut off, and for a moment, the only sound was the collective gasp of terrified passengers. "Okay," Alicia whispered to herself, forcing her breath to steady. "Think, think, think." She looked around, catching the eyes of the elderly man a few rows ahead. He nodded at her, his expression grim but determined. "Anyone have a plan?" the teenager called out, her voice trembling but defiant. Alicia swallowed hard. She didn't have a plan, not yet. But one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Simon Says. The bus rolled along the desolate cliffside road, its tires crunching gravel with an ominous rhythm. No one spoke for a long moment. The passengers sat frozen, staring at one another in disbelief as though silently willing someone else to step up and declare this was all a mistake. Finally, Craig broke the silence. "All right, enough. This has gone far enough." He stood again, gripping the nearest pole for balance. "Sit down," the teenager, Maya, snapped from the back. "Unless you want him to jerk the wheel again." Craig ignored her and marched to the front of the bus. "Listen, whoever you are, we're not playing your stupid games. Pull this thing over or I'll—" The intercom clicked on, cutting him off. "Simon Says, sit down." Craig hesitated, glaring at the driver's reflection in the rearview mirror. His jaw worked silently, weighing his pride against the situation. Then, muttering a curse under his breath, he lowered himself into the seat closest to him. Alicia let out a shaky breath, her heart pounding. The driver's voice returned, calm and mocking. "Good boy. Now that we understand the rules, let's keep things interesting, shall we?" Game 2. Truth Hurts. The bus slowed slightly, cruising along the winding road. Alicia glanced out the window, hoping for a sign of where they were. Anything that might help. But the cliffs stretched on endlessly, the ocean below shimmering like a jagged trap. "The next game is called Truth Hurts," the driver announced. "A simple concept. Each of you will answer a question honestly. Lie and, well, you'll see." "What kind of questions?" Leonard, the retired teacher, asked. His voice was calm but firm, a teacher's instinct for controlling a classroom showing through. "Good question, Mr. Leonard," the driver replied, his tone unnervingly cheerful. "Let's find out." The intercom went silent for a moment. Then the driver's voice returned, directed at Maya. "You first, little rebel. Why are you skipping school today?" Maya stiffened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "None of your business. Wrong answer." The bus swerved violently, throwing passengers against their seats and drawing gasps of terror. Okay, Maya shouted. I didn't want to do a stupid presentation. All right? Happy now?" The bus stabilized. "Honesty is a virtue," the driver said, almost laughing. The game continued, the driver singling out passengers one by one, each question designed to unsettle. "Craig," the driver called next, "how many people have you stepped on to climb the corporate ladder?" Craig's face turned red. "What kind of question is that? You don't know anything about me." The bus swerved again, harder this time. Craig grabbed his seat, his knuckles white. "Fine. Plenty, okay? You happy? I've done what I had to do." "Good boy," the driver said again, his tone dripping with mockery. When it was Alicia's turn, she froze. "Alicia," the driver said, his voice soft, almost kind. "What would you do to protect your son?" Her throat tightened. She could feel the weight of the other passengers' eyes on her, their judgment tangible. "Anything," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The driver didn't respond immediately, but the bus stayed steady. Alicia swallowed hard, unsure if she had passed or failed. The fracture. By the time the game ended, the tension in the bus was unbearable. Accusations flew as passengers turned on each other. "Why don't we rush him?" Craig demanded. "There's more of us than him." "And if that fails," Leonard countered, "do you want to be responsible for what happens to the rest of us?" Maya snorted. "Oh, sure, let's all listen to the guy who's too busy being righteous to be useful." Alicia stood, her voice sharp. "Stop it. Fighting isn't going to get us anywhere." Craig rounded on her. "And what's your plan, huh? Sit tight and hope for the best?" "I'm saying we need to think," Alicia snapped back. "There's got to be a way out of this without getting ourselves killed." The bus fell silent again, save for the sound of tires on gravel. Game 3. Musical Tears. "Wonderful teamwork," the driver's voice rang out, dripping with sarcasm. Since you're so good at working together, let's see how you handle the next challenge. The bus slowed to a stop. The doors hissed open, revealing the edge of the cliff just a few feet away. The passengers froze, staring at the churning waves below. Musical tears, the driver said. Step outside, form a circle, 1 chair per person, -1. No way, Grace the intern whimpered. You can't seriously expect us to. Simon says, step off the bus. The passengers hesitated. Alicia was the first to move, her legs trembling as she stepped out into the salty air. One by one, the others followed, casting wary glances at the driver, who remained seated, his face obscured by the sunglasses. A circle of folding chairs stood on the cliffside. Alicia's stomach churned as the game began. Chapter 3. Musical Tears. The ocean roared below, its relentless waves smashing against the jagged rocks. Alicia shivered in the salty wind, her gaze locked on the folding chairs arranged in a neat circle, just steps from the cliff's edge. She didn't want to look down, but the cliffside loomed in her peripheral vision, a constant reminder of how precarious their situation was. The driver's voice crackled through the intercom, though he remained seated on the bus. It's simple. Walk in a circle while the music plays. When it stops, sit. The one left standing. He chuckled, and the sound sent a chill through the group. Well, let's just say Simon didn't ask them to stay standing. What the hell does that mean? Craig barked. It means we don't have a choice, Alicia said firmly, stepping into the circle. She met Craig's incredulous glare and added, You want to argue with him, or do you want to stay alive? Reluctantly, the others followed. Maya shoved her hands into her hoodie pocket and muttered, This is so messed up. The first round. Music crackled into life from the bus speakers, a tinny rendition of an old nursery rhyme, eerie in the desolate setting. The passengers shuffled around the circle, their movements stiff and jerky. Alicia's heart pounded as the music abruptly stopped. She lunged for the nearest chair, barely beating Grace to it. Grace stumbled back, her eyes wide and panicked, as she realized she was the odd one out. Wait, The ground beneath Grace's feet suddenly shifted. A trapdoor hidden in the rocky ground snapped open, and with a blood-curdling scream, she disappeared. The group froze in horror, staring at the gaping hole as it slammed shut again, leaving no trace of Grace except the echo of her scream. Holy, Maya started, but the driver's voice interrupted her. Simon says, keep playing. Breaking under pressure. Craig rounded on Alicia, his face red with anger. This is on you. You told us to play. Alicia stood her ground. She'd be dead whether we played or not. You think sitting out would have made a difference? We're just going to keep playing until we're all gone, Craig shouted. Leonard stepped between them, his voice steady. Fighting won't help. We need to think. Alicia nodded, but the lump in her throat didn't budge. She wanted to tell Leonard he was right, that they could outsmart the drivers somehow. But the image of Grace falling, her scream, was seared into her mind. The second round. The music started again, and the group hesitated before shuffling around the circle. Maya broke the tension with a muttered, What is this, Lord of the Flies? No one laughed. This time, the music stopped mid-step for Alicia, and she barely found a seat. Leonard moved with surprising speed for his age, securing his chair just before Eddie, the comedian, reached it. Eddie froze, his face crumpling. Come on, man, The trapdoor opened beneath him, and he was gone before anyone could react. Alicia shut her eyes, bile rising in her throat. Simon says, Keep going, the driver said again. Fractures deepen. As the group returned to the bus, the mood had shifted. Craig refused to meet anyone's gaze. His usual bravado dimmed. Maya muttered something under her breath, and Leonard looked as though he'd aged 10 years in an hour. When they were all seated, the driver spoke again, his voice almost jovial. Good work, everyone, but there's still more fun to come. Alicia felt something snap inside her. Why are you doing this? She demanded, her voice shaking with rage. The driver chuckled softly. Oh, Alicia, that's not the right question. The question you should be asking is, how much are you willing to lose to win? The plan. Back in their seats, Alicia leaned toward Leonard, lowering her voice. We need to get out of this. We can't keep playing. Leonard nodded grimly. Agreed. But how? The doors are locked, the controls are with him, and any misstep, he didn't finish. I don't know yet, Alicia admitted, glancing at Maya. The teenager sat hunched, staring at the floor. But we need to stick together. No more infighting. Craig overheard and snorted. Great plan, Mother Teresa. Stick together while he picks us off one by one? Alicia ignored him. She turned her attention to the bus, scanning for anything that might give them an edge. A window lever, an emergency exit, anything. We just need to buy time, she said softly. If we can outlast him or force him to slip up, that's a hell of an if, Leonard said. Cliffhanger ending. The bus jolted suddenly, the engine roaring louder than before. Next game, the driver announced, his voice full of dark amusement. This one's a classic. Ever heard of The Floor is Lava? Alicia's stomach dropped as the other passengers exchanged panicked looks. Simon says, don't touch the floor. Chapter 4. The final game. The driver's voice echoed through the intercom, its mocking cheer cutting through the silence. Simon says, the floor is lava. You have 30 seconds to get off the floor, or you burn. Good luck. For a moment, no one moved. The passengers stared at the floor, which began to glow an ominous red. Heat rose in waves, distorting the air and stinging their skin. Then, chaos erupted. Move, Alicia shouted, pulling Leonard up from his seat. She scrambled onto the seatbacks, the worn vinyl slick under her trembling hands. The others followed, gripping poles and edges for balance as the bus tilted slightly to one side. 20 seconds, the driver announced, his voice as smooth as silk. Scrambling for safety, Craig leaped onto the seatbacks with the agility of someone used to clawing his way to the top. This is insane, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Maya, balancing on the edge of a pole near the back, shot him a glare. You just figuring that out now? Leonard, slower than the rest, clung to a seat with trembling hands. Alicia reached back to steady him, her voice firm. I've got you. Just don't look down. 10 seconds, the driver said, his tone almost gleeful. The bus jolted, throwing Eddie off balance. He flailed for a handhold but missed, landing hard on the glowing floor. A scream tore from his throat as flames engulfed him. The smell of burning fabric and flesh filled the bus, and the others turned away, their faces pale. Time's up, the driver said, almost laughing. Well done, most of you. Let's keep the fun going. The final game begins. The floor dimmed to its usual worn gray, but the tension didn't ease. The remaining passengers, Alicia, Craig, Maya, and Leonard, clung to their precarious perches, their breaths shallow. All right, folks, the driver continued. It's time for the grand finale. One last game to decide who wins and who loses. What the hell does that mean? Craig barked. It means, the driver replied, that the only way this ends is if someone takes the wheel. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Alicia's gaze shot to the front of the bus. The driver still hadn't turned around, his face hidden behind sunglasses and a cap. The wheel sat before him, ominously steady. You've got 60 seconds, the driver said. If no one takes the wheel, the bus goes over the cliff. Simon says, choose. A race against time. The bus began to accelerate, the edge of the cliff growing closer with each passing second. Panic rippled through the passengers. We have to do something, Alicia shouted. Craig sneered. Oh, sure, just stroll up there and grab the wheel? You saw what happened to Eddie? Then what's your plan? Maya snapped. Wait for him to serve us tea and let us off? Stop it, Alicia yelled. We don't have time for this. Leonard, his face pale but determined, spoke up. She's right. One of us has to try. It's the only way. Alicia met his gaze and nodded. I'll go. No, Maya said firmly, stepping forward. You've got a kid, right? You don't get to be the hero here. I'll do it. Craig snorted. Oh, great. Let the kid handle it. Fantastic plan. Shut up, Maya snapped. Sacrifice. The bus jolted again, throwing Maya against the wall. She gritted her teeth and climbed forward, gripping the poles for balance. Alicia moved to follow, but Leonard placed a hand on her arm. Let her go, he said quietly. Alicia shook her head, her throat tightening. She's just a kid. She's stronger than you think, Leonard replied. Maya reached the front of the bus, her legs trembling as she steadied herself. The driver remained motionless, his hands gripping the wheel. The seconds ticked away. Hey, Maya shouted. You want me? Here I am. The driver finally turned, his face eerily calm. He removed his sunglasses, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to see straight through her. You've got guts, kid, he said, but guts won't stop this bus. Maya lunged for the wheel. The driver moved faster than anyone expected, grabbing her wrist. You didn't wait for Simon to say, he whispered. Maya screamed, but she didn't back down. With a burst of strength, she wrenched her arm free and grabbed the wheel, the final choice. As Maya wrestled with the driver, Alicia sprang into action. She climbed forward, grabbing a metal pole and swinging it at the driver's head. The blow landed with a sickening crack, and he slumped to the side, unconscious. The bus swerved wildly, the edge of the cliff looming closer. Maya grabbed the wheel with both hands, her knuckles white as she struggled to steady the vehicle. Alicia, she shouted, I can't do this alone. Alicia scrambled forward, gripping the wheel alongside her. Together they managed to turn the bus away from the cliff, the tires screeching as they skidded to a halt. Aftermath. For a moment, no one moved. The bus sat still, the ocean roaring below. Craig let out a shaky laugh, his bravado shattered. We're alive? Leonard sank into a seat, his hands shaking. Barely. Alicia looked at Maya, who was slumped against the wheel, her breathing ragged. You did it, Alicia said softly. Maya gave a weak laugh. Yeah, guess I'm not so useless after all. The driver stirred, groaning. Alicia grabbed the pole again, ready to strike, but he raised a hand. It's over, he said weakly. You won. Why? Alicia demanded, her voice trembling with anger. Why did you do this? The driver smiled faintly. Because no one ever played fair with me. I wanted to see if people could. Alicia stared at him, her stomach churning. You're insane. Maybe, he murmured, his eyes closing. Epilogue. The bus was found hours later, teetering on the edge of the cliff. The survivors were hailed as heroes, though they would never forget the horrors of that morning. Maya stood at the cliff's edge, her arms crossed. So what now? Alicia placed a hand on her shoulder. We move on. Maya nodded, though her eyes remained on the horizon. The wind howled, carrying with it the echoes of the driver's chilling games. The end.